Matt Walsh just made an absolute fool out of himself on the Joe Rogan show.
So Joe Rogan is at it again.
Whenever asked how many transgender kids he thinks are on puberty blockers, he estimated that it was in the millions. The reality? 4,700. Watch this clip.
How many people have had this done?
Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but it's if we're talking about the drugs, it's millions.
You're talking about hormone blockers.
Yeah,
Millions of
blockers
kids have been on hormone blockers. Really?
I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on that, but my guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Yeah, that would be my guess. I think that this shouldn't be happening to.
That's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
This says it's kind of undercounted, but that's
That would be a big
less than
undercounting.
1,000 people a year.
Hundreds of thousands at this, but I could be wrong.
Million sounds great.
Yeah.
Now, this may seem like really silly and stuff, but the truth is Matt Walsh is one of the top lobbyists for anti-transgender legislation in the United States. And so the fact that he's willfully getting these kinds of things wrong just goes to show how far they're willing to distort the facts in order to prevent transgender youth from transitioning.
So this TikTok by Aaron in the Morning points out the ridiculousness that is both Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh. Now, Joe Rogan has had a long history of bringing transphobes onto his show and giving them a platform to spew a bunch of ridiculous nonsense about trans people. And Matt Walsh obviously has a very long history of being incredibly transphobic. I mean, he quite literally calls himself a theocratic fascist and willfully spreading outright lies about trans people and engaging in ridiculous conspiracy theories about trans people. But this time it was a little bit different, and honestly it makes it all the more hilarious, but also all the more revealing about who Matt Walsh really is and who Joe Rogan really is. Because they actually bothered to fact check something that Matt Walsh said. Matt Walsh tried to claim that there were millions of children on hormone blockers, which is fundamentally ridiculous. On its face, it is a claim that obviously has no basis in reality. And it was so ridiculous that one of the people on Joe Rogan's team actually thought to fact check that claim. And they actually found that over the past couple of years, there have really only been 4,000 children that have been on hormone blocker, which is a lot less than a million. But notice what happens next. Matt Walsh then turns around and says, oh, it's probably an undercount, and it's probably hundreds of thousands, like it could be hundreds of thousands. And then Joe Rogan just kind of lets that slide and laughs about it. Because fundamentally, this, in Joe Rogan's view, doesn't really affect Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan is the type of person where he wants to seem like he's reasonable and he's taking this middle ground. But to him, the middle ground that he seems to allow in this moment is a middle ground between ridiculous, hateful conspiracy theories and just objective reality. That when Matt Walsh says millions, the facts say 4,000, and Matt Walsh says, well, maybe hundreds of thousands, then Joe Rogan just kind of lets that slide. And that just tells you two things. First and foremost, the types of people who want to always be in the center no matter what and seem like these really cool, reasonable guys actually cultivate the environment that hate needs to thrive in. Because when you allow this sort of like unquestioning centrism where you will just accept blatant lies, you create an environment where hateful people are incentivized to just go to the furthest extreme that they can possibly think of and hope that the middle ground that you come to is hateful. Because we need to understand that there are two layers to bigotry. There are obviously the people that spread outright bigotry and hatred and vitriol, but then there are also the people who think that it doesn't matter to them or they're willing to give a pass to that bigotry. That itself is bigotry. If you feel like the concerns of a community don't affect you and thus you don't have to care about or prioritize them, that itself is a form of bigotry. You are basically saying that an entire category of people are less important than you are, and that their needs are less important than your needs. But then that explains exactly why people like Matt Walsh spread the hateful conspiracy theories that they do. Because they know that the Joe Rogan types are going to bring them on their show, they're going to let them say all of these ridiculous things, and then when they say these ridiculous things, when they get fact-checked, they actually get more attention focused onto them. Because you're put in an impossible situation then as somebody that tries tries to cover the news, you're like, well, do I cover what this person says and point out that it's a ridiculous, hateful lie that is obviously rooted in Matt Walsh's belief that trans people shouldn't be allowed to exist? Or do we completely ignore it and avoid giving this ridiculous, evil person a platform? And the unfortunate position today is the fact that there are literally billionaires like Elon Musk who are willing to actively promote transphobic conspiracy theories that we are then forced to have a conversation about these hateful weirdos. Fundamentally, at its core, within the scientific community, there's not really any question as to whether or not trans people exist, and whether or not puberty blockers and HRT are beneficial for trans children that need it. That is something that is fundamentally uncontroversial within the scientific community. The problem is when people like Matt Walsh try to spread vitriolic conspiracy theories fueled by hatred, because their goal is to prevent trans people from existing in public life. People like Matt Walsh are advocating for policies that would effectively ban any type of transition-related care. And not just for people under the age of 18, for people of any age. There are several states that are trying to push drag queen laws that would effectively prevent trans people from presenting as themselves in public. We're in an incredibly dangerous time because these conspiracy theories against trans people are going along in tandem with a bunch of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that are being pushed by very famous influencers like Kanye West, for example. And this is something that is not new, because believe it or not, in Germany in the 1930s, they also spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that tried to make being transgender out to be some sort of weird conspiracy theory and part of some like larger plot to destabilize Western culture. And so really, the main takeaway from all of this is when somebody like Matt Walsh tells you that they are theocratic fascist, you gotta take them at their word. And when they are spreading anti-Semitic and transphobic conspiracy theories, you gotta recognize that for exactly what it is. Because we're at the point now where people like Matt Walsh have enough influence that there is legislation being passed at the state level and already legislation introduced at the federal level that is explicitly aimed towards preventing trans people from being able to live peacefully. And in some instances, some of this legislation is aimed at criminalizing the existence of trans people.